I'm Gosling, also known as G90. I'm the artistic director of Together 2012, and it gives me huge pleasure to welcome you here tonight to Amble Cluses and Toria Banks' opera. We ask these questions of everyone, and I have to almost have a double take there, as you could probably tell, because I'm currently being pursued by a social worker to take part in a review that I actually can't take part in the way that they're asking me to. And indeed, we ask these questions of everyone. So, can we have Toria? I think, Emily, if you want to ask. Yes, here we go. And if we can spotlight Toria, wonderful. So I'm just thrilled to introduce Toria Banks, and Toria is going to tell us just a little bit more at the moment about the opera that we're going to see, and then we'll have much more opportunity to talk about it afterwards.
Hi, Ju. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to be here. Just before I start, my name's Toria. I'm a white woman in my early 40s. I have got blonde hair with fringe and blue eyes and very pale skin. And that's partly the not leaving the house since March last year thing, isn't it? You're getting, or some people are getting a very good view of the inside of my kitchen, which has white cupboards and blue tiles.
Thank
Uh,
you, Toria. I've got so carried away, I forgot to do my audio description. That's the trouble with doing two things in one day. I think I've already done it. But in fact, so I am a white woman with a self-styled hennaed corona crop, mercifully hidden under a purple trilby. I decided at the beginning of this year that really it had to be the year, if not the decade, of the hats. I've got pale olive skin with green eyes behind black plastic glasses. I've got black plastic wrist braces and silver-coloured jewellery. I've got a black t-shirt that says Disabled People Against the Cuts, and I have a black silk jacket with a green lining, which is a sort of luminous green that practically matches the back of my wheelchair, if you can see a little flash of that. Behind me, you can see a little bit of the Together 2012 graffiti banner. We created that in 2014. You can see it on a number of our publications and online. And there's also a sort of shiny, lasery tablecloth covering a whole bunch of random musical instruments. So I'm going to hand back now to Toria and say, go for it.
okay, so yes. First thing I should say is Amble's scoos. I'm no slight to Ju there, but just to make sure that yeah, that we get her name right, because she's an amazing
Yeah,
composer.
apologies for that. I've got, as some people may know, I've got a communication impairment and I can see it, but it doesn't always come out right.
It's okay. It's not a problem. It's an unusual name. But yeah, so Amble Scoos and myself wrote this opera together. I put the text together and Amble wrote the music. Last year, we planned it to do it before the pandemic hit, but then the pandemic arrived right at the beginning of our process of getting to actually make it. So all of the kind of practical getting done of the project happened remotely, and we worked with 4 amazing disabled musicians, all of us separately from our own homes. So Victoria Orawari, who's an opera singer, is with us this evening for the Q&A. And we worked with her and Steph West, who's a folk singer and harpist, and Clarence Adu, who is a jazz instrumentalist, and with Dr. Sonia Alori, who plays the clarinet in the piece, but is also a composer in her own right. Yeah, it was an interesting process, but I can't help feeling that as a disabled group of people, we were more used to the idea of adapting than a lot of artists last year. And that we actually had a really great time doing it, although it's quite difficult subject matter. So the subject matter of the piece is that we've made an opera out of a PIP assessment, which feels in some ways like an act of defiance, but we know that that's not a really cheery thing. We also wanted to include um, other much kind of bigger and more generous perspectives that we got from interviews with a lot of disabled people. So that's what you're going to hear as well as part of the kind of choruses. So, like a lot of operas, it has scenes and then it has choruses, and our choruses are kind of electronic and made up of the voices of a lot of different people that we interviewed. Whereas the scenes that you will hear are between our two singers. But I think it will all become clear as you listen and as you watch. Um, it's what you'll see are creative captions made for us by an artist called Laura Spark, and obviously that's because we wanted it to be accessible, but hopefully they're a beautiful part of the experience. But if you don't want to look at them and you just want to listen, or that's how you're going to experience it, you also won't miss anything. It is primarily a kind of audio work. So if that's a better experience for you, then that's good too. I think that's all I need to say. Do we need to add anything?
Sorry about that. I was trying to switch myself on again. Yes, I'm going to put a content warning in the chat as well. But just, well, I mean, I think you've already made it clear, but let me just read it out if I can click it back up again. Yes, so we ask these questions of everybody, as Toria has just said, include some difficult subjects in disabled people's lives. We'd like to give some content warnings, starting with an acknowledgement that the whole piece draws on a benefits assessment interview and that these are difficult subjects for a lot of people. You can, yeah, just switch yourself on, switch us off, pause it at any time, maybe have a cup of tea, come back for the Q&A. Other content warnings are for ableism, anti-disabled hate, chronic pain, death and mortality, and mention of suicide. So just sums up 2021 really. You can see details by clicking on a link that I'm going to put in the chat, or you can message Toria privately with any questions. Was there anything else to add on that, Toria?
No, that's great. We just wanted to make sure that nobody gets any surprises that they don't want that might be really unhelpful for them. If you click on the link, if there's anything you're worried about, it will tell you how many times it's mentioned and when it comes up. But hopefully there's a lot of joy in the piece too. But just want everybody to take care because it's been a difficult time. Shall we begin? Or we're waiting on that link.
No, I'm sure we can begin because, yeah, I think we've been very clear that people know what they're expecting. And if it's not what you were expecting, then like I say, please, all things have happened today, then have a break, come back and listen to the chat.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen and start the piece then.
Thank you so much, Hera. That was just such a feast for the ears and thought for the brain. And I think for many of us, it also brought back all sorts of memories. There's wow, amazing, extremely powerful, and other comments which will keep reading in from the chat. But now, can I invite Hera to switch on their cameras and join us? So, thank you, all of you. Sheila Freeman is saying some stark lines, and Sarifa Patel is pointing out that if you've got English as a second language, things are even worse. But what I'd like to do is start by asking you to tell us more about the creative captioning that forms the visuals, partly because not everybody's been able to access that, but it's a good place to start anyway. Could you include a description, do you think, Toria, of how the creative captioning worked, and then explain yeah, why you chose to do it in that particular way.
Yeah, sure. The captioning is quite varied, but I would say it uses two main visual languages. For the sections of the opera where you heard Victoria and Steph singing as Lynn from the DWP and Hannah, the disabled woman, in those sections, the text appears on various kind of uh, colors and layers of what looks like paper. Um, Sometimes with the DWP logo, sometimes with envelopes, sometimes with kind of more official looking, and sometimes in kind of scribbled handwriting, particularly when it's Hannah's more emotional moments. Um, and then when you hear all of the chorus of the interviewees' voices, um, there's a visual similarity, but we see those little snippets of text coming up as if they're in text messages, emails, WhatsApp messages, tweets, all sorts of forms of electronic communication. Um, and Why did we do that? Um,
Well, it was certainly very effective. I loved the colours. Well, you can describe them better than I can, but yeah, could you just talk a little bit about the colours of the paper?
um, so partly that is that we wanted the whole thing to be beautiful, which, you know, DWP PIP assessments are not a natural subject for beautiful art. And we know that, but the whole team from the beginning, it's like we want to make something beautiful from this ugliness that is foisted on us rather than to make something ugly with it. So that was definitely something that we talked to Laura, the visual artist, about. So there's a lot of it's not all sort of black and white and brown envelopes. In fact, there aren't any brown envelopes. There's a lot of pink and purple and green and sort of quite floral and kind of jewel-like colours in there. Um,
Yeah, I found the colour choice really, really interesting. A quick plug on Sunday, the 5th of December, in our lunchtime discussion at the film festival. What we're considering is whether there's a new art form developing through these things that have created on Zoom. And I think you're such a great example of that, where it doesn't have to be a story that it explains why everybody's individually in their home speaking to camera. You can record it like that, you can connect like that, you can put visuals, you can use creative captioning, you can use other things. So if any of your company are free on the 5th from 1 to 2, we'd love to see you, and I do encourage the audience to come as well. We've got a number of the filmmakers who've been making films and creating work on Zoom coming.
I'd be really interested just to get one more thing in answer to your question of um, something that came up with the whole company, talking to Victoria and Clarence and Amber and Sonia at the beginning of the project, when we realised that we would all be in our own homes and doing the sound recording over Zoom. That um, that we not only did we decide that, you know, making a film is really, really expensive, you know, and a 50-minute film wasn't realistically within the budget that we had for making a stage show. But also we had a really interesting conversation about how members of the company had felt displayed sometimes in other work, even in supposedly kind of inclusive or disabled focused work. And we felt that putting people on camera, filming artists while they're singing and playing musical instruments, is a little bit different from just being in the same room sharing a musical performance together. If you film something, if you decide how to frame someone in a shot, if you do a close up, you're really kind of encouraging people to be looked at. And when we talked about not doing that and not filming the performers, and I told a friend that we weren't going to do that. A friend in academia and disability studies, her immediate response was, "Oh, an led company would never do that. They'd never employ all of those disabled artists and then not show them to their audience." And that was a really shock. I mean, I don't think she's wrong, but it was I found it to be quite a shocking moment. It really confirmed for us that having the text be the visuals of the story was what we wanted. So that's when that decision became really firm, because I was like, yeah, that's important.
Well, I think the sound was so beautiful and so stunning and so layered. I'm going to come on to that though, because so let's go back a minute. So it was due to be a stage opera. Where did the original idea come from, and where does this story begin?
Amber, do you want to talk about that a bit? Because it kind of starts with you.
Yeah, sure. Hello. Um, I was commissioned to do a piece for the Power Orchestra, and that's where I met Victoria and Steph and Clarence. And for that piece, we didn't really end up making the thing that we were going to make, but for that piece, I interviewed a lot of disabled people, so that bit came first. And then I transcribed some of those interviews and turned them into a song for Victoria and Steph to sing, with Clarence and some other musicians doing some backing stage. For various reasons, but I had a record of people that I'd interviewed, and we became friends as a result of that. But that's how we met. She was one of my interviewees, and so we were chatting one day, and I said, I've got this song. We're not actually going to get to do the show anymore, but I'd like to do something with it. And she said, that sounds like it could be an opera. And I just sort of fell over a bit, because I'm a composer at all. But the more we talked about it, the more we felt like actually there is a human story, there is a drama. And then I think it was Toria's idea to put the Pip interview as the main kind of structure of the story. And we'd been given, so everything you heard in the Pip interview is from one person, Hannah. That's not her real name, but we had the actual tape recording of her interview and the full transcript, which she'd given to us to make a show with. So then Toria took that and obviously had to edit it, because it would have been really long. But that's where the idea came from, really. Initially, it was I had made songs out of the chorus parts, which Victoria and Steph had sung for me, and then we kind of built the actual recordings of the interviews, and the sung part was the Pip interview.
Amazing. So that had been my next question. But you did the interviews before the pandemic?
Yeah, that was part of my PhD, and I think partially for me as well, as I was sort of starting to realize that as a disabled artist, I needed to have more confidence in sort of coming out as disabled, and being able to, because up until then I'd sort of hid it quite a lot. And I decided, I think through working with flip artists, that I didn't want to do, and this is how I need to work. And so as part of that process, I interviewed, I think, about 26 disabled people. And it started out being about the cuts, because it was around the time of the cuts, at the DWP cuts. And so there was a lot of stuff in there about, do you feel like the media has changed the way it looks at disabled people in the past 10 years since the Conservatives have been in? And how do you feel society looks at you as a disabled person? And how do you respond to that? And like, what are your strategies for dealing with those feelings? And like, what does it mean to be a part of a disabled community? So just having those conversations with people just completely kind of changed the way that I looked at how I worked as a disabled person and where I stood in the world. And so it was almost like a sociological experiment, which I knew I was probably, everybody had the right to retract what they said. And I think they had options to be quoted and be named, or to be anonymous, or to be sung but not have their voice recorded. So we, like, all the power was given to the interviewees in that way. And when we went back to them and said, this is what we'd like to use in the opera, and we gave them every single quote of theirs that we wanted to use, and said, you know, do we have permission to use this? And everybody said yes, which was just beautiful. Like, there wasn't anybody who said, I don't want you to use what I've said. Everybody was so generous. But we were really keen that we wanted to make sure that we weren't just appropriating people's stories and whacking them in our opera without checking with them that that's what they wanted to say and that's how they wanted to be represented. So yeah, the interviews were really, really crucial. Like, a really, really crucial part of the story. And I think without that, the Pip interview might have been a little bit, well, it is very traumatic. It is very distressing, but it also might have been a bit focused on in disability, which is benefits and tragedy. Whereas I think with the chorus, it lifts it into a much realer experience of disability. And you actually hear what people actually think about their lives with people. So yeah, those interviews were like really important to us.
I mean, I think I love the way you've got the medical model of disability absolutely firmly in the interview, and then you've got the social model of disability coming through in the chorus. But I also particularly like the way that by layering and putting effects on and distorting and putting different sounds on the chorus, there's times when it becomes harder to hear, but it makes you focus more. And I really liked that juxtaposition. Oh goodness, there's so much to ask, but I think we should come on to Victoria to ask her something. So I was really interested in Amble's reference to Para Orchestra. Para Orchestra started around the same time as Together 2012, and we've always had quite close contacts. And I had a dear friend who was with Para Orchestra. So yes, Victoria, tell us more about your role in the opera.
So I play the role of Lynn, the DWP worker. When I first of all received the script, I was thinking, how can I play such a person whom I have been unfortunate to be at the receiving end of, and also do it justice. It was quite a struggle. I had to find some empathy for her role, and I went off and thought about this narrative that maybe she too was a very hard done by person who has been through so much, and she has this job because it pays the rent, and obviously the more people she can make it difficult for, the more money she gets, and she's kind of caught in the same what do they call it, treadmill, as I was caught up in, but I happen to be further down the line than she is. So it was with that in mind that I was able to kind of read those words and deliver them.
And when did you join the project? Was this before pandemic and lockdown one, when you were doing the stage show or planning the stage show?
Well, we've been planning the stage show initially. Was it 2019? I can't remember now. But we decided to, Amble and Tori, I think, must have decided to make it an online thing when the pandemic hit. And we thought, wow, what a great idea. And then obviously I like the comfort of being able to record from my house and not going anywhere. I think that time none of us was vaccinated yet because it was quite early on. Yeah.
And can I come back to you, Toria, and ask about the production process? Because it must have gone through all sorts of different stages.
Yeah. So obviously there was a sort of writing and rewriting process for it to be an online piece, and kind of thinking about it in that way, and it needing to kind of make full sense kind of in an audio way, because as a writer for theatre you always want there to be things that aren't just in the text, but then you have to kind of rethink that. And then when it got to kind of the nuts and bolts and practicalities, we did everything on Zoom, but recorded using, so it wasn't recorded with Zoom, but we were all on Zoom while we were recording. with separate recording setups in each artist's home, so that we could get, the really important thing was to get the quality recording, but for the quality recording to be a genuine response to the other person, particularly in the scenes between Steph and Victoria, which is, I think, one of the things that early on, some people working in classical, trying to do stuff over Zoom, you know, that became the sort of stumbling block, is everybody was recording parts separately and you lose the interaction, albeit that Lynn's character often, you know, isn't really listening, or her responses don't, you know, that there's a lot of sort of non-communication, but it meant that we could rehearse properly, we could rehearse conversations, and we could record in that way. And then I'm extremely lucky that Amble is a composer and a producer and sound designer, because we'd have needed about 5 extra people if that wasn't true. So all of the files from everything went to Amble, and in addition to composing the music in the first place, she then had essentially a whole extra role, not just of making electronic portions of music, but also kind of putting the whole thing together. And making the instrument which Clarence played, and you know, there's a it's a lot easier to do music remotely when you're working with somebody who has both compositional and tech skills, and we'd have needed a lot of extra people otherwise.
Well, I mean, I'm presuming, Amble, that the sound is actually more complex than you could have on stage. I mean, I'm not sure, but I would be, you know, unless it's pre-recorded and played on the stage with things like the chorus, I would have thought that was hugely difficult to mix live.
Well, the chorus was actually all recorded as live triggers. That wasn't pre-made. That was played in the room. So basically I made a sampler which Clarence, I don't know if anyone knows Clarence. Sorry, what?
No, I don't know Clarence.
We lost her.
So basically Clarence. Oh, okay. So Clarence is paraplegic and has a tube which is called his head mouse to control his computer, and he blows into the tube for a click. So I made a sampler. Am I still here? I'm still. It's like a séance. Sampler, and Clarence knew which samples were behind which buttons, and then he played the choruses live. So that's him triggering that in real time.
And is that with all the multi-layering and the effects as well?
No one's responding. You can't hear me.
Hi, Tori. We can hear you.
No, I'm doing the layering and the effects.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and that, you know, I mean, I just loved the whole thing. I loved the sound, but yeah, I just wonder if you could actually put that quality on stage.
We're on a really big delay, and I think Amble might come back in over me in a second, but I think we would definitely be working with something like that, with live mixing, but definitely there's an element of precision control in doing it this way that is harder to get live. On the other hand, the benefits of doing it live are that there are whole kind of built-in parts of the structure which would then be different in every performance, which is something that we're really interested in, and as part of kind of both of our interest in like not being overly controlling as kind of authors of the work, that the performers, there are quite a lot of things within it that are controlled by the performers, and that obviously if you do it repeatedly and live, that kind of works in a different way. So it's definitely kind of positives and negatives. Like, I'm really glad it exists in this way now, but I sort of also hope it's a live show as well at some point.
Yeah, and hopefully a live show that's streamed so that people like myself can still access it from home. I mean, I think absolutely everything's got gains and losses going online. The principal gain is that we're safe and we can do it in the first place. I know that it came out to rave reviews at the Sound Festival earlier in the year. Do you want to tell us a bit about its journey as a project?
Is that me again? I think it. So yeah, Sound Festival were really great and supportive about getting it made and being flexible about what form it was going to take. As were Creative Scotland, just chuck that in there, because if we'd had an application into ACE, it would have gone in the bin when the pandemic struck. And I know that happened to a lot of people, and I'm really sorry if that was you, anybody that's listening. It's only because we were being commissioned by Sounds that the funding application was in Scotland, and then it went ahead because Creative Scotland didn't bin everything. So so that was
Scotland.
that was great. I don't live in Scotland, but sometimes I think I should.
I live in Scotland. Sonia lives in Scotland.
Yeah.
So two of us are Scottish.
Yeah.
We're Londoners.
Yeah, me and Victoria are both in South
We're
London.
Londoners, yeah.
And then this is Sound Festival is very much a kind of new music event. And so that was great, and I think we did reach quite a mixed audience, but this is really great for us because we wanted to come to a festival that's kind of specifically reaching a disabled audience, because I really hope it makes sense to everybody, but I think for everybody involved, we were making it in the first instance for ourselves as members of the disabled community and for other people in the disabled community. And if other people benefit from that, then that's great. But really, I kind of see us as the core audience. So that's, and then, so far that's it, and we'll kind of see where it goes. We'd really like for, and as a digital piece, this is easier, but we'd really like for it to reach an international audience, because I think the UK is in an interesting situation in being so shit for disabled people, but so good at disability arts. And that's an interesting balance.
Yeah, I mean, certainly kind of judging by the standard, if we ask these questions of everyone, I mean, it is a world-class piece. It's been so beautiful to listen to. I mean, I'm really lucky because I've got fast fibre and I've got stereo speakers, but it was, I'm very, very, very fussy because I can't actually automatically focus on sound, so I do literally hear everything. And it was just such a treat to hear so many tracks at once and so many different sounds. And you absolutely succeeded in taking something that's makes us all so sad and so angry and so frustrated, and making it really beautiful and claiming it. I felt you really reclaimed that whole experience. So I'm going to, because we've only got a few minutes left, just read some of the comments. We haven't actually had questions in the chat, but we've had comments. So playwright Kate O'Reilly said about 5 minutes ago, very sadly have to leave early. Thank you so much. A terrific piece of work. Loved Ju's comment of medical model in the assessment and social model in the chorus. Huge congratulations to all. So pleased I managed to experience this. Thank you and good night. Margaret says, yay, Scotland. I think we will do that. Sorry, I'm just a bit slow. Vince Laws says, well done, poetic, relentless, take care all. Sarifa's had to go early, but said she really enjoyed it. So it's just going back. Sheila Freeman says, I think I shall remember some of these quotes as I go for my UC health assessment this coming week. And we've put our heads together in Newham this week and realised that there's a whole bunch of social workers going around forcing us to have reviews, whether we're well enough or not, in order to cut our packages. So it's been particularly apt today. And yeah, Margaret says, I was so impressed. Amble, for anybody who can read it, says, thank you. Well, thank you so much again. We've got about 30 seconds left. I'm wondering, Victoria, you've not said masses. Why don't we give you the last word?
Well, I'm glad that lots of people had the time to listen to this because it does shine the light on a lot of challenges that disabled people have. I feel very honored to have been a part of it, and I hope we told everybody's story.
I think you absolutely did. You know, yes, I mean, I just couldn't have been happier to be able to have the privilege of hosting this tonight. It's going to be available on our website until the end of the festival only, although we will keep up this end bit recording of the Q&A. So if you've got friends, it won't be listed, so you have to go through the festival event program page, but I'll be sending that link around. We'll be popping it up on our social media probably in the next couple of days. So check it out, tell your friends, and if you do have friends who are international bookers, then please let them know that there will be a stage show eventually, but in the meantime, there is just this amazing piece. And finally, Margaret says, well done, congratulations to you all. I really love the way it was performed. Sheila says, feel blessed to have been part of it. And yes, I feel exactly the same way, Sheila. So it's exactly 8:30. Thank you so much to Amble, to Toria, to Victoria, to Chris Burrow from Burrow Interpreting, who's been absolutely tireless in her work tonight, to Julia Jacobi from Global Real-Time Captioning, and of course to Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund for their funding, which as always is much appreciated. And I have to give a special thank you to the Community Fund because unlike the Arts Council, they managed to find us some extra money for the costs of live captioning for this festival. So thank you everybody, and of course, thank you all for watching and for listening. Have a very good night and a safe journey to the kitchen.